Page 19. At last Ralph ceased to blow and sat there, the conch trailing from one hand, his head bowed on his knees. As the echoes died away, so did the laughter, and there was silence. Within the diamond haze of the beach, something dark was fumbling along. Ralph saw it first and watched till the intentness of his gaze drew all eyes that way. Then the creature stepped from the mirage onto the clear sand, and they saw the darkness was not all shadow, but mostly clothing. The creature was a party of boys, marching approximately in step in two parallel lines and dressed in strangely eccentric clothing. Short shirts and different garments they carried in their hands, but each boy wore a square black cap with a silver badge on it. Their bodies from throat to ankle were hidden by black cloaks, which bore a long silver cross on the left breast, and each neck was finished off with a ham-bone frill. The heat of the tropics, the descent, the search for food, and now the sweaty march along the blazing beach had given them the complexions of newly washed plums. The boy who controlled them was dressed in the same way, though his cap badge was golden. When his party was about 10 yards from the platform, he shouted an order, and they halted, gasping, sweating, swaying in the fierce light. The boy himself came forward, vaulted on the platform with his cloak flying, and peered into what to him was almost complete darkness. "Where's the man with the trumpet?" Ralph, sensing his sun-blindness, answered him. "There's no man with a trumpet, only me." The boy came close and peered down at Ralph, screwing up his face as he did so. What he saw of the fair-haired boy with the creamy shell on his knees did not seem to satisfy him. He turned quickly, and his black cloak circling. "Isn't there a ship, then?" Inside the floating cloak he was tall, thin, and bony, and his hair was red beneath the black cap. His face was crumpled and freckled and ugly without silliness. Out of this face stared two light blue eyes, frustrated now, and turning or ready to turn to anger. "Isn't there a man here?" Ralph spoke to his back. "No, we're having a meeting. Come and join in." The group of cloaked boys began to scatter from the close line. The tall boy shouted at them, "Choir, stand still!" Warily obedient, the choir huddled into line and stood there swaying in the sun. Nonetheless, some began to protest faintly. "But Merridew, please, Merridew, can't we?" Then one of the boys flopped on his face in the sand, and the line broke up. They heaved the fallen boy to the platform and let him lie. Merridew, his eyes staring, made the best of a bad job. "All right, then, sit down. Let him alone." "But Merridew, he's always throwing a feint," said Merridew. "He did in Gibb, and Addis, and at Matins over the precentor." This last piece of shot brought sniggers from the choir, who perched like blackbirds on the crisscross trunks and examined Ralph with interest. Piggy asked no names. He was intimidated by this uniform superiority and the offhand authority in Merridew's voice. He shrank to the other side of Ralph and busied himself with his glasses. Merridew turned to Ralph. "Aren't there any grown-ups?" "No." Merridew sat down on the trunk and looked around the circle. "Then we'll have to look after ourselves." "Secure on the other side, Ralph," Piggy spoke timidly. "That's why Ralph made a meeting, so as we can decide what to do. We've heard names. That's Johnny, those two. They're twins, Sam and Eric. Which is Eric? You? No, you're Sam. I'm Sam. And I'm Eric." "We'd better all have names," said Ralph, "so I'm Ralph." "We got most names," said Piggy. "Got 'em just now." "Kids' names," said Merridew. "What should I be, Jack?" "I'm Merridew." Ralph turned to him quickly. There was the voice of one who knew his mind. "Then," went on Piggy, "that boy, I forget." "You're talking too much," said Jack Merridew. "Shut up, Fatty." Laughter arose. "He's not Fatty," cried Ralph. "His real name's Piggy." "Piggy! Piggy! Oh, Piggy!" A storm of laughter arose, and even the tiniest child joined in. For the moment, the boys were a close circuit of sympathy with Piggy outside. He went very pink, bowed his head, and cleaned his glasses again. Finally, the laughter died away, and the naming continued. There was Maurice, next in size among the choir boys to Jack, but broad and grinning all the time. There was a slight, furtive boy whom no one knew, who kept to himself with an inner intensity of avoidance and secrecy. He muttered that his name was Roger and was silent again. Bill, Robert, Harold, Henry, the choir boy who had fainted, sat up against the palm trunk, smiled pallidly at Ralph, and said that his name was Simon. Jack spoke. "We've got to decide about being rescued." There was a buzz. One of the small boys, Henry said, that he wanted to go home. "Shut up," said Ralph absently. He lifted the conch. "Seems to me we ought to have a chief to decide these things." "A chief! A chief! I ought to be chief," said Jack, with a simple arrogance, "because I'm chapter, chorister, and head boy. I can sing C sharp." Another buzz. "Well then," said Jack, He hesitated. The dark boy, Roger, stirred at last, and spoke up. "Let's have a vote. Yes, vote for chief. Let's vote." This toy of voting was almost as pleasing as the conch. Jack started to protest, but the clamor changed from the general wish for the chief to an election by a claim of Ralph himself. None of the boys could have found good reason for this. What intelligence had been shown was traceable to Piggy, while the most obvious leader was Jack. But there was a stillness about Ralph as he sat that marked him out. There was his size and attractive appearance, and most obscurely, yet most powerfully, there was the conch. The being that had blown that had sat waiting for them on the platform with the delicate thing balanced on his knees was set apart. Him with the shell. "Ralph! Ralph! Let him be chief with the trumpet thing." Ralph raised a hand for silence. "All right, who wants Jack for chief?" With dreary obedience the choir raised their hands. "Who wants me?" Every hand outside the choir except Piggy's was raised immediately. Then Piggy, too, raised his hand grudgingly into the air. Ralph counted. "I'm chief, then." The circle of boys broke into applause. Even the choir applauded, and the freckles on Jack's face disappeared under a blush of mortification. He started up, then changed his mind, and sat down again while the air rang. Ralph looked at him, eager to offer something. "The choir belongs to you, of course. They could be the army, or hunters. They could be—" The suffusion drained away from Jack's face. Ralph waved again for silence. "Jack's in charge of the choir. They can be— What do you want them to be?" "Hunters." Jack and Ralph smiled at each other with shy liking. The rest began to talk eagerly. Jack stood up. "All right, choir, take off your togs." As if released from class, the choir boys stood up. Chatter piled their black cloaks on the grass. Jack laid his on the trunk by Ralph. His gray shorts were sticking to him with sweat. Ralph glanced at them admiringly, and when Jack saw his glance, he exclaimed, "I tried to get over that hill to see if there was water around, but your shell called us." Ralph smiled and held up the conch for silence. "Listen, everybody, I've got to have time to think things out. I can't decide what's to do straight off. If this isn't an island, we might be rescued straight away, so we've got to decide if this is an island. Everybody must stay around here and wait and not go away. 3 of us will take more, we'd all get mixed and lose each other. 3 of us will go on an expedition and find out. I'll go, and Jack, and—" He looked around the circle of eager faces. There was no lack of boys to choose from. And Simon. Beginning of page 24.